They never dreamed that people would be seeing them all around the world and watching DVDs or television and things like that. So, and particularly, American in Paris had come out the year before, and everyone assumed that American in Paris would be the sine qua non of American musicals. And yet, Singin' in the Rain came along and has become kind of the preeminent one. But I have to say that not everybody likes Singin' in the Rain. I did get a letter from a gentleman. It says, "Dear Mrs. Jean Kelly, my name is Alan. I am in the 4th grade at PS 86 in Jamaica, New York. My class and I watched your husband's movie, Singin' in the Rain. I didn't like your husband's movie." I love 4th graders, I think, right? They just can't tell a lie. Also, I found out that if your husband's movie is short, if it didn't have dancing or singing. Maybe your husband could cut out the dancing and it just gotten to the point of the movie. Can't your husband just stop thinking about dancing? Your friend, Alan Palacios. He wrote that to me in 2003. He's now a 19-year-old kid in Jamaica, New York. And I wrote him a note after this, and I thanked him for his very honest opinion when I told him that there was actually a reason for the singing and dancing. And that it was a main point, and the way that Jean wanted to change the American musical was to make the musical numbers actually further the story. And this kind of thing is very revolutionary. So when you want to tell the woman, or you want to show that you're in love and show joy, you dance in puddles in the rain. So it does. So that was it. And then Jean got another letter that I think is really precious. But it says, "Dear Mr. Kelly, my name is Jim Hadley. My mother won't let me jump off the furniture." Why did your mother let you? Okay, now, there is so much mythology surrounding Singin' in the Rain. I'm going to start knocking a few of these things out. We might as well get a little bit straight. There is no milk in the water. And it was actually phenomenal cinematography, lighting, all of the technicians were amazing. For those of you who've been to a football game and it's raining, did you ever notice that if you're looking down at the field, you don't see the rain until the camera tilts up and you see the rain coming down with the light behind it of the stadium? Well, that's what the cinematographer and the lighting people had to do in this movie. They had to backlight the rain so that you could actually see it. And in order to do that, they had to make sure that the light wasn't reflecting in all the store windows. And then they had to make sure that they were lighting Jean from the front. So this was a phenomenal technical task. One thing that is true is that Jean was very sick when he shot the Singin' in the Rain number. He did have a temperature of about 103. And this was all shot on the lot at MGM, and it's they just draped it all in black and hung rigging with water that would come down. So he would go outside onto another part of the set and lie on the sidewalk and just burn the temperature out of him in the sun. And then come back in and do more takes. He had been out sick a few days beforehand, but they shot that number in 1.5 days. Wow. It was all choreographed by Jean. Everything you see Jean choreographed, and I have his handwritten choreography for that. I found it in a box as I was unpacking after he died. It singed from the fire, but it survived. And he would sit in a chair at night, and he had a little camera, a little screen that ran in his head, and that's how he created dance, sitting down like a writer in a chair. And he would write down. He never learned a formal dance notation like Laban. He had learned a kind of shorthand as a kid growing up in Pittsburgh. I know there are a lot of Pittsburgh folks here tonight. And he and his little brother Fred would go to all the traveling shows. It was a great stop on the vaudeville circuit, and they would go to the shows, and each would take turns memorizing the first 8 bars, and they would run into the lobby, jot down in a shorthand what they'd just seen, and then the other one would run back in, and they'd alternate. And then they'd put their notes together and take flour and water and paste them together create these kinds of numbers, arrangements, that then Gene would kind of modify and make his own. He would also, what he would do is sit at night and create the numbers, and then go in the next day and put the numbers on the bodies of the dancers. So he also choreographed the puddles. Each of those puddles was cut out in a particular way. You will hear that the water supply in Culver City went down when people came home from work. That is true. So they did have to stop and hang additional rigging. L.B. Mayer had been moved out of his position at the studios, so Dory Sherry was actually head of production and was the one in charge of Singin' in the Rain. And in fact, it was Arthur Freed who chose Debbie Reynolds. He called Gene up into a projection room one afternoon and had a clip, as she said, of Yabba Dabba Doo Woo Woo with Carlton Carpenter. And he said, "This is the girl." And so they called Stanley Donen up, and Stanley said, "But can she dance?" And she couldn't. But that didn't really bother Gene, because in Pittsburgh and Johnstown, Pennsylvania, he had spent years teaching kids to dance. And so that's how he approached it. It's the same way he approached teaching another dancer, another actor who'd never danced, Frank Sinatra. You teach them like children. You start with very elementary things. And then, in the case of the woman in particular, you choreograph to the woman. So, like, for example, in You Were Meant for Me, he choreographed that to Debbie's abilities. He said, I wasn't trying to make her Sid Charisse or Leslie Caron. I just wanted her to look her best in that, as she did. She's terrific. So if you have any questions about Singin' in the Rain, call me. Don't read any of the books. Don't read anything on the internet. It's not true. Don't particularly stay away from Wikipedia, my least favorite thing in the world. I'm on Facebook, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. And even better, do what I did. I interviewed Gene every day for over 10 years. I recorded his words in every format. And after he died, I felt he was pretty on target. His memory was very intact, and he had directed, choreographed, and performed in these movies. And so he had a different perspective than the other people in them, because he had to watch the bottom line, and he had to pay attention to every detail. But to check his record, I went out to USC, and they have this wonderful thing there called the Arthur Freed Collection. And in that, they have, I mean, fortunately it's survived. Fortunately, Arthur Freed donated his papers, because otherwise the history is gone. MGM threw away their papers, Columbia threw away their papers. It's the saddest thing. But we have this tremendous record there. And just as an example, I'm going to read you, there are two different types of production records, but this is the detail. Okay, this is from 9:27 to 9:29, start rain for scene. From 9:29 to 9:32, Kelly changing pants due to loose cuff. From 9:32 to 9:34, put sawdust in puddle for effect. 9:34 to 9:36, shoot take one. Take 9:35 to 9:48, add additional rain pipe, sweep excess water off streets. It goes on like that. So you can check anything anybody says, because it's really very clear. And it's down to the minute. It's remarkable. So anything about gum being on the set would have been noted, I think. But he did have a hairpiece, that's true. Okay. Enough of mythology. It was a terrific team. Gene said there were no auteurs. They're giving me 9 minutes. It's like speed dating. I feel like, how do you take 10 years and collapse it? But I'll talk fast. It was a terrific team, and all of what you see up on there is not Gene, it's everybody, and it's all these terrific talents. Gene felt that Donald O'Connor was one of the great unsung heroes. He thought he was one of the greatest improvisational comedians ever. The number Make 'Em Laugh actually grew out of what Donald would do during takes. He would try to make Carol Haney and Jeannie Coyne laugh. So he would pick up whatever was around the set and play with it. And one day there happened to be a dummy there, and he would do these funny little things and make funny faces. And everybody was breaking up. The girls were falling down. So Gene had Jeannie and Carol write down everything that Donald was doing. And Gene put it into sequence of Make 'Em Laugh. And you have this extraordinary number. Gene felt the Moses Supposes was the best tap dance that he ever did on film. Eleanor Paul and Fred Astaire and Broadway Melody of 1940 was the best that somebody else did. Sid Charisse came into the picture as kind of a fluke because Donald O'Connor had a previous contracted obligation to the Colgate Television Hour and had to leave the production. And they needed this big Broadway melody ballet. Debbie Reynolds didn't have the dance talent to complete that, so they did bring Sid Charisse in. She was this terrifically trained classical dancer from the Ballet Russe, and Gene said she was extraordinary, and as Debbie said, she had these legs that went on for miles. But it was very hard to get her off point into dance jazz, and Gene worked with her on that. But then she went on to have this phenomenal career and did things like Dancing in the Dark with Bandwagon that was Gene's favorite pas de deux on film. Gene felt that Gene Hagen was the glue that held the picture together. And contrary to a couple of accounts, Gene very much wanted Jane Hagen in the picture and thought only she could play that. But it was the one argument that they had. Arthur Freed and Stanley Donen thought that it should be a more glamorous woman, and Gene said that when she was made up, she would look the part. So she was nominated for an Academy Award, but lost to Gloria Graham in The Bad and the Beautiful. Sid Charisse, did you all notice the black bobbed hair? I don't know if that brings back any memories, but that was Louise Brooks. Gene had a terrific crush on Louise Brooks, and so he fashioned Sid after her. If you notice that green dress she had on, the censors would come in and they would measure the height of décolleté in a dress, and it had to pass a certain height. And also the same with the height of the skirt. So Gene would cheat. He would let them measure it, and then he'd slit it. And it was all for a point, because obviously what you wanted, Gene was always looking for the way to get the longest line of the dance. You wanted to show the most amount of body and still play the role. The number where